Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm really pleased to have you join us today, both in recognition of Women's History and also recently designated International Women's Day. In celebration of that, I am joined by two incredible women to talk about the Innovation Igniter at Blackfire, but also about their perceptions of women in the gaming industry, women in general in business, and opportunities that we see to really raise the representation across the board. To begin, I'd like to introduce you to my incredible panelists. First, Virginia McDowell. Virginia is a board member of Entain, who is one of the co-sponsors of our Innovation Igniter initiative. She was also the founder of Global Gaming Women and was formerly the CEO of Isle of Capri. And in addition, we have Sandra Douglass Morgan, who was both the one of the first women ever appointed to lead the Nevada Gaming Control Board. She's also a director of Fidelity National Financial, and she was just appointed a director of Cerberus Sentinel. If I got that right, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you.
So both of you have been so incredibly accomplished in your careers. What do you think gave you that voice, that platform? Was it a mentor, a sponsor, or did you just find your way? Start with Sandra.
Right. Thank you for having me, Jan, and a pleasure to be here. An honor, honestly, to be here with you and Virginia, both trailblazers in your own right. For me, it was a combination. I'm very blessed to have two strong parents that raised me and my sister to be sure that we were confident and knew that education was the most important key to our success, but also to give us the confidence to strive for what we really wanted. But early on in my career, I'm an attorney, and so I started at a firm, and I could see very early on how men would be promoted to partner, and the different just dynamics when you're working at a larger firm. And at that point, I realized that I had to make sure that my work spoke for itself. And so I was always very prepared. But I did have mentors and allies along the way, which was incredibly important, I think, for every stage of my career, to have someone who believed in me. And it was truly a two-way relationship. One, I had to seek that out. And two, I had to make sure that I was confident and prepared to know that if someone were to sponsor me or mentor me, they knew that I wasn't going to lead them down as well. So it was definitely a group effort, and I've been blessed to have a lot of support, but also very lucky that I did have people that were willing to pull me up or to put my name in for a promotion or to even put my name in for an appointment, to chair the gaming control board. And so it takes, I think, not only goals and efforts, but also true accountability and actually, taking it serious enough to want to help other people's actually rise to the occasion and give them an opportunity to perform.
We've talked a great deal about that on the importance of sponsorship and helping other people come forward. Virginia, not only have you been a CEO of a major gaming company, but you were the founder of Global Gaming Women, whose intent was to give women a platform and a network to come together and collectively advance. You want to talk a little bit about that and how you think it's working?
Sure. I just wanted to first echo what Sandra said in terms of who inspired her and her fabulous career. I also was very, very blessed to have two parents who believed in me and who inspired me. Neither of my parents graduated from high school, and they moved out of essentially the city of Philadelphia to the suburbs when they could little afford it. To provide a better education, for their children many moons ago. And what they taught us is hard work and dedication will get you where you need to be, but you should never let anyone tell you that you can't reach for as high as you want. So I also have been very blessed to have a series of mentors and sponsors. Jen, you and I have talked about the importance of both, many times over the years. And one of the reasons why Global Gaming Women was so important to me in both of its iterations, the first time when it was started as an initiative of the American Gaming Association, and the second time when we launched as an independent 501c3 in 2016, is that we looked at this as an opportunity for senior women in the gaming industry to give back and to help build the next generation of women in the gaming industry.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about, I don't think of it, but I speak about it all the time, that my parents were the single most important factor, and it was confidence factor. You know, they always said you can be anything you want to be. And Virginia and I are coming from a time when women weren't told that. You were told you can be these categories of things. And it's interesting. I remember one moment when I think it was my freshman year at Stanford, and I got a C in Western civilization, the first C I'd ever received in my life. And I called my father, sobbing, saying, "I'm so sorry. I've let you down." And he said, "Stop. You worked very hard to get here." He said, "The thing I want you to learn about now is people." He said, "Grades won't make your career. Understanding people, understanding how they think, understanding relationships, making relationships will make a difference of where you go from here." And I think that's very solid advice that we forget sometimes, that those relationship skills and the importance of women helping other women develop those skills. One of the programs we're talking about today is a partnership between Entain, which is a Las Vegas and global sports betting and entertainment company, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, Las Vegas, to bring more women into STEM. We think it's a wonderful opportunity to identify students, give them the opportunity to learn about STEM opportunities tactically, see development, work in conjunction with engineers and other development officers at Entain, so they can really practically see where they can go and how they can get there. What are your thoughts about that, Virginia?
Well, we're thrilled to be a part of the program, first and foremost. We're committed to gender, diversity in the workforce. We love the idea of being able to establish an office, in the Harry Reid Research and Technology Park to include staff members from our tech disciplines. But one of the great things that we've been able to do as one of the world's largest sports betting and gaming groups is to flex our muscle a little bit more. And so within the last couple of days, we just announced a partnership with Girls Who Code internationally, and we will be one of their most significant global partners. And we also just announced a partnership with Tech Girls Movement in Australia, which again challenges gender participation in the workforce. And so our goal is to quite frankly close the gender gap in tech, and we believe that we have the platform to do this.
And interestingly, I would just say for the audience, Entain also lives by their values. Their CEO, their most recently appointed CEO, is a woman. Sandra, and all of us over a period of time have watched the conversation around equity, inclusion, diversity. We've talked about equal pay for women, women in equal leadership positions. And honestly, we haven't seen a great deal of tangible change in the composition of leadership at the top of not only Fortune 500 companies, but specifically in the gaming industry. What do you think some of the elements are about that derive that reality, Sandra? And do you see change?
I am hopeful and optimistic that there will be change. And I'll start with just kind of discussions about the gaming industry. And I'll focus on Nevada because I'm a Nevadan and an LV grad, and that's why I have my Rebel Red on. But I think that our state and our gaming industry is different, unlike any other, because my parents and my community that I was raised in, you were able to make a decent living wage working in the gaming industry at various levels of positions. And we all know that there is a greater representation of people of color in the non-management roles in gaming, right? But you're able to make a decent wage and care for your family, and that's wonderful. But you have a certain ceiling when it gets to management, not only for people of color, but certainly for women of color and women in general as well. And so I think that we always have kind of waves of discussions on what we can do to actually truly advance having a greater representation of women and women of color in management roles. But I do see a change here. This is for various reasons. One, as you know, there was discussions and some movement on making sure that gaming properties actually have discrimination and harassment policies. And once that goes into effect, it actually makes people produce policies to the Gaming Control Board. And although that's right now, it's just a policy, the fact that it's being discussed and being required makes people think about it. And it makes that CEO or that general manager actually task someone with drafting policies that they know will now have to be produced by their regulator, which I think is a good first step. The other step I think that will hopefully move, that makes me more optimistic, is honestly the younger generation. They want to spend money in places that are in line with their values. So they're asking questions that I think even my generation probably wasn't, what is their employee breakdown? What causes do they support? And their wallets are going to actually translate into the policies and the types of issues that they deem important. And we know that this younger generation thinks that diversity and inclusion is just as important as making sure that they're meeting their bottom line. I also think gaming is at an interesting place when they're trying to actually attract a younger demographic. And you see that through sports betting with, Virginia's company Entain. You see that with all the larger and even smaller mid-sized gaming operators as well. And so in order to reach that younger demographic, yes, you can look at things like esports and skill-based gaming, but also their CSR efforts are going to be reviewed as well, because they understand that in order to attract that younger demographic, they're actually going to have to put, their money where their mouth is. And a social media post, encouraging and supporting diversity and inclusion isn't going to be enough. The younger consumers are going to want to actually see true change.
I really understand and embrace that sentiment. In the 2018, when I was working with Caesars Entertainment, we announced an initiative 50-50 by 2025, where we made a commitment that by the year 2025, we would have equal representation of women and women of color at all levels of the organization, both horizontally and vertically. And to your point, we started that by doing a dashboard that showed us what we look like. And what we looked like really wasn't pretty. You had 50% women, but as you went up to senior positions and then to the C-suite, the numbers became smaller and smaller and smaller. But just making people aware, seeing yourself, and not being able to make an excuse, changes the way management sees it, changes the way you put in programs that drive you to a more equitable, inclusive outcome. Do you, Virginia, see the gaming industry that they could take a leadership role in really beginning to change composition of representation of women in color on both their boards and in their C-suites?
Well, if Entain is any example of that, absolutely. I joined the board of Entain 3 years ago as one of 2 women on the board. We have just recently announced one of only 6 female CEOs in the FTSE 100. In the London Stock Exchange. We just announced 2 more female board members and our first BAME member. Our entire board composition has changed dramatically in 3 years because we understood that we should reflect the diversity of our customer base. So yes, you can, but you need to take a leadership role and you need to commit to it. You need to do, quite frankly, the hard things and make the hard decisions that we've been talking about. I missed a little bit of that last conversation, but one of the things that we have been very concerned about, both at Entain and at Global Gaming Women, is just that we've lost a generation worth of progress for women in the workforce as a result of the pandemic, and women of color have been hit particularly hard. And so it is an opportunity for companies to step up. It is an obligation at this point for companies to step up, and to help us not only gain back what we lost, but make a lot of progress in the future as well.
It's interesting that you should mention that. Sandra and I have been having a lot of discussions around the fact, for anyone who's watching that don't know, over 1 billion women have fallen out of the workforce due to the pandemic. And a lot of it was just overload. You know, they were trying to run their homes, run their businesses, be a full-time teacher, be a full-time partner, and they just felt they couldn't do it all. And the findings are that if someone had reached out, talked to them, mentored, we could have kept a lot of those women in their jobs. And so now companies, I think they have, I agree with Virginia, an obligation to reach out, not only look at themselves, see how their organizations compare when it comes to representation, but also look out and see in our communities how we can bring a lot of those women back into the workforce. How do you think that could be best accomplished, Sandra? What would be some of your ideas on how companies could be successful?
You know, I think that pre-COVID, everything was status quo. People needed to have face time, especially in executive offices. They went to work, you know, everyone was there. They had to have these meetings, and this really disrupted, not only just because of the unfortunate loss of jobs, but just disrupted the way that people are doing business. And so I hope that as things open back up and, you know, different, you know, we start having events again and people are able to go out, that people really look and see, how was employee X, who's a female, was she still able to be productive and be able to not just allow more flexible schedules? And we talk about flexible schedules and know that it only actually assists women. Well, we know that women were actually decided maybe to leave the workforce because they had to manage their families. And so when you help families succeed, you help everyone succeed, right? It's not just
right
as well. And unfortunately, you know, unfortunately in the world we live in, when we talk about just helping one particular demographic, people think that when you help one demographic that means another one's losing something. And so I think if people start to realize that when we help women, we help everyone, it'll definitely help how people think about how we work, how we communicate, how we engage one another, and hopefully how we hire and promote. You know, it all comes back to honestly not just education but relationships, as you mentioned, Jan. And when you're making that decision to hire, or even more importantly, promote, what is that base? What are you basing that on? You know, is it the ability to kind of fit in with the team? Is it the ability for that sponsor or that person who's promoting to be able to work with them? And what type of implicit bias or actual bias does that person have that's hindering them from promoting women and women of color? I think once people genuinely understand that in order to give people additional rights and opportunities, that doesn't mean that I'm losing something, that will change. I do think COVID, unfortunately, you know, stripped a lot of things down and made people really look at some of the barriers that have been placed for such a long time. And I'm hopeful, again, that the younger generation and leaders in the gaming industry will understand that more change has to come.
Sandra, what's interesting is the nature of disruption in general. So we've had this huge disruptive event, and it's caused us to look at our entire world, our entire business, everything a little bit differently. And while that's obviously been painful in some ways, it's also disrupted the status quo. And so now all of a sudden we're going to have the opportunity to do things a little bit differently, because when you get caught up in the way that it's always been done and we can't change anything, then that's where we go down that rabbit hole of we're not even going to try. And over the last year, we've been forced to, and look what's happened as a result of it. I mean, we moved literally the whole world to being able to work at home virtually when we thought that was impossible before. Well, just think of all the things that we can do now that we know if you put your mind to it, you can try. You know, and I think that has to do with, you know, how we basically build companies in the future, and compendiums. And when you talk about bias, all of those things, you know, it gives us the opportunity to reset for the first time. And that's actually exciting.
You know, it's interesting, Virginia, because we were talking when we lost you for just a minute about the importance of seeing measurement. Sandra set standards at the Gaming Control Board that caused companies to think about it, how they met those standards. We're doing somewhat similar things we did at Caesars. The Innovation Igniter is intended to attract women, predominantly women, into tech jobs and then show them how to succeed. But Blackfire Innovation, which is at the Harry Reid Engineering Park, for those of you who don't know, is also focused on looking on ways how we can innovate more broadly around the advancement of women, women of color, marginalized groups. What would you think some of the things, if you were talking to global gaming women, that they should take back to their companies, that they can put in place that really starts to enact that evolution of change, but in a more rapid progression?
You know, one of the things that has driven me crazy for years, Jan, is literally going back, and I mean, I know that this sounds so simple, but literally going back and rewriting job compendiums. I mean, if you actually go back into these huge mammoth organizations and you look at the hiring process, there's so much unconscious bias, even in the way our job descriptions are written, that if you hire based on the way those job descriptions are written, you are automatically discriminating. So let's throw all of that out. Let's go back in and start with something as simple as going in and looking at job descriptions, rewriting job descriptions for the world that we live in today, not whatever you copied and pasted from the last 3 places that you worked and brought into your organization right now. And that's no disrespect to very talented HR professionals, but it's something that we need to do. Our world has changed. So something as simple as starting there, I think we need to do.
It's interesting. Sandra and I have had a number of conversations about women at times have a tendency to categorize themselves by their job title, and that really beginning to understand skills and aptitude and ability can make a huge difference in jobs that you might look for. Sandy, you've certainly seen that in your career.
Or just thinking that, you know, you're not thinking because of that job title that you wouldn't be qualified or you don't have the skills to meet it, right? When you ask someone, or when I ask women and anyone, especially someone that's maybe just out of law school that's debating what they want to do, and I ask them, okay, well, what did you do every day? I mean, and the skills management, people management, project management, right? Those are things that maybe they don't recognize. That's a skill set they have, and because they're not recognizing their own talent and own self-doubt, that's prohibiting them from applying for that job. Whereas someone who maybe hasn't been told their whole life that, oh, you know, this management position is generally for males, they won't have that self-doubt and will go ahead and take that risk and apply for that position. I do think, though, back to your point, and I just wanted to mention this, number of women who have left the workforce. Just imagine how many people possibly would have stayed if their employer said, okay, I know you have an ill spouse or a child that you have to, you know, assist with virtual school. We're okay if you work from 7 to 10 at night instead of, you know, 2 to 5, because you need to care for your spouse or your child. Or
you know, interestingly, the findings have shown, had that communication take place, that the majority of the women probably would not have dropped out. As you said, if they took care of the family and just tweaked how they saw. So we were fortunate enough to spend the last half an hour together because of Women's History Month. If you had one wish for what either the gaming industry or the broader workplace looks like a decade from now, what would that be? Sandra?
Goodness. I would hope that there would be a greater appreciation for varied experiences, and not just for race and gender, but sexual orientation and religion, because as we all know, the gaming industry and many businesses about revenue and making money. And I think when you have a truly varied experiences and lived experiences that are coming with those decisions, whether it be just general business, marketing, training and hiring, that workforce and that mindset will, I think, ultimately increase revenue. So I hope in 10 years we will still be talking, but I hope we'll be talking about the progress that's been made, because I do think that Las Vegas specifically has always said green is the most important color, but I hope that translates to hiring and promoting more executives who are women and women of color.
Virginia, you and I have been hopeful for the last 2 decades. What do you hope for the next decade?
Jen, I wish we didn't have to work as hard as we do. You know, we've been having, and again, going back to Global Gaming Women a decade ago, literally a decade ago. We were 50% of the workforce then. We're 50% of the workforce now. And we were approximately at that point 10% of the management then, and maybe what, Jan? You're probably closer to statistics than me. 18 now?
Maybe.
Maybe. So as hard as we have worked, as hard as organizations like Global Gaming Women have worked, and Jan, what you've dedicated your career to, and Sandra, you as well. You know, here we are a decade later, and that percentage of women in management hasn't increased a lot, which means that we have to do better. And again, we have the opportunity in a disruptive world right now, maybe to change things so that this happens a lot faster. And when you look at the Igniter, and when you look at the Entain partnership with Girls Who Code and the other things that we're doing around the world, again, to close the gender gap in tech, maybe that helps. But since particularly women and women of color were hit so hard in the hospitality industry during the pandemic, it's a heavy lift. It's a heavy lift.
I see the Innovation Center at Blackfire, hopefully in a decade, helping to have women see their full potential, have the voice to use it to strongly advocate for that potential, and that business finally comes to the very real reality that I could give you data all day long, that more representative management teams are higher performing management teams. Yeah. They make more money. As Sandra said, we see the color of green. If you want to make more money, then use your highest and best talent and use it wisely and don't squander it. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll look forward to seeing you both at the Innovation Igniter and at Blackfire Innovation. And we'll sign off and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.